Let's talk money.
I don't have your money.
I know I'd be a lot happier with some extra cash.
Is this about money?
Obviously, this is all about money.
Oh, man, we got bills to pay, buddy.
With practical tips and a focus on scripture, let's talk money. With Dave and Reb. From More Than Enough. Real conversations about money for real people. Let's talk money.
Are you ready to talk money, Dave?
I am ready to take a journey into the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. A little promo there. I was trying to get that voice, right? So
we're going to hitchhike the galaxy?
The financial Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's what we're discussing today.
Okay. Well, that will be interesting. So I hope you are all interested in what that means, because before we get to Dave explaining what that means, I want to thank and welcome all of you for coming and listening to the show today. We are so grateful for you on this 473rd episode, if you can believe it. And we want to thank Stanley's Old Maple Lane Farm today. If you haven't been
new sponsors for us.
I know it's a new sponsor. Well, Colin Gallagher is one of the managers over there, and they are a space that you want to hit this March to get maple syrup. They have a maple syrup production demonstration in their sugar shack. They've got tractor rides. They have farm animals. You can visit their barn, and they do traditional bucket and spile collection methods. They also have modern tubing methods, and you can go in and learn all about maple syrup production from the Stanley's Old Maple Lane Farm.
Place to take the kids.
They have, it is. And all year long, they have different venues. You can, Colin and his wife, Sierra, actually, we were just there for their wedding a few years ago. And it's a great spot to have a wedding or a celebration. And please be in contact with them at stanleysfarm.com. You can go visit their website, and that will be in the show notes. So,
if you missed Valentine's Day, guys, just take her there. Like just pretend like it was the I had to wait till sugar season started, because it obviously doesn't start in February. If you missed Valentine's, that might be a cover.
Okay, so I take it you're going to take me to Stanley's then?
Yeah, 100%.
So, what am I stepping into here?
I know.
Rebecca and I are celebrating our 35th anniversary this year. And we've committed together, more me than her, to do 35 things to celebrate our anniversary. So Stanley's might be on the list.
Okay, you could take me to Stanley's.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, we want to welcome Brent to you back. Yes, you didn't know what you were stepping into, and he's going to explain his Hitchhiker's Guide thing in a minute. But we want to thank you for joining us, because last week you were here, and Dave, you can explain why Brent's here.
So, I mean, we started to dig into this beginner's guide to investing. And when we finished the show, I was like, I feel like I've kind of entered this universe where I know kind of nothing about it. Like, it's vast and expanding and growing and changing and all of that. And then I thought, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like, it's just got that vibe, that feel. So making the connection, but also going, I don't think I'm alone in that Brent, you're here because you've been doing this your whole adult life. You've been in this world of not just savings, and we talked about that last week, and we won't go there, but investing and growing the resources that we have available today, so that down the road you have more than enough. And so as we look at that, going, Brent, we're here, and of course welcome you, but also here to say, what do we do to start right at the beginning? It's like, how do we get there? Like, how do we start that? And so that's where this guide that we have, the Beginner's Guide to Investing, really that's where it came out of. Your office has put it out. It's for all of those young people, relatively short read. You can do that in about 15 minutes, but it will serve you your whole life, right?
So if you missed last week's show, please go listen to it. Brent talks about why they created the document, and we're going to have access to it probably in the show notes today. So it's available for us to learn and get that guide. It is a guide. So Brent, thank you. Thank you for being here from Crosspoint Financial today. One of the verses there's a few verses in Proverbs that talk about seeking wise counsel. But I was drawn to the one in Proverbs 11:14, where there is no guidance, a nation falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety. And you're one of the counselors in our lives. You're one of the people that we go to wisdom. We're like, Brent, what do we do? Is this a scam? We heard about this. Is this a scam? And we just appreciate you. So we're grateful that you have created this document. So we want to dig right into it today. And because we left off with learning and understanding and a plan. And we wanted just to start with risk tolerance, I think, today, right? I think that's where we want to go.
So. Yeah. Although, can I just say, you guys are so fun. Your banter, the wittiness, the laughing. I want to interject, and I don't have to be quiet every time, but it's like having a party in here, not a podcast. So thanks for having me back.
Hey,
it's a lot of fun to join you guys.
Like
welcome
parties.
to the party.
Yeah. Welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party.
Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes.
We'll have to go back and watch that. It's been a few years, right, Dave?
As you pointed out, or read the 5 books, I think Will, our producer, has covered all of that. So anyway,
there you go.
But so
risk, right? Yeah. After following on last week, we talked about why we're investing, where we're putting money, types of vehicles. We'll get into a little more of that in a second. But understanding then risk is really important, right? That's risk, meaning like the volatility of an asset price, and almost more defined as like, what's the probability of loss? Like, can I lose all my money? Can I lose some? Will I have permanent loss, or will it be just a short-term blip on the way to making more? And that's this kind of unknown. I think people gloss over that and don't understand how much risk they're taking when they invest in certain types of things.
Is it really? People don't?
Oh, I think a lot. Yes. People, I get lots, or used to before, I guess, lots of calls on, hey, should I put all my money in gold now, for example, right? Well, it's just that premise, so that whole idea of like, all your money in gold, all in one thing. And so you're so certain on the outcome. And it's not that gold's a bad thing. I'm not against gold. We have positions in it. I own myself, right? But this idea of like that gives this basis of thinking around risk that I don't think they quite understand. And so it's like ideas on stock tips. Oh, should I buy the chip maker? Should I buy whatever it is? And it's like the idea is they're going to put a disproportionate amount of their money in that investment in order to see an outcome that they hope fixes a problem, basically.
Right. And there's an awful lot that you just said that was like, oh my goodness, like we could go 100 places with that to go, when we're talking about risk, really it comes down to, it's so personal, and your own understanding of how you view that risk is significant, in the sense that, like I say, if you've been hit by a car walking across the street, then walking across the street becomes a risk to you. If you've never been hit by a car walking across the street, then you don't see the risk. It's so personal, and yet both of them are walking across the street. And so in this world of finance, understanding personal history, and I know you guys do a full, we want to get to know you. We want to get to know what your experience is, and then help you to feel comfortable in those risks.
But if they don't have Brent or his team,
right,
a person has to know that for yourself. Like in the document, I don't know if you want to talk about this here, but the risk tolerance having 3 parts.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. Okay. And I think we'll be able to provide another document to help go along with this. That'll be a questionnaire process that someone can go through to identify these 3 things. And
they can do it for themselves then. They don't, they
don't need us to do that. So those risk from our world has 3 different components to it. One is someone's ability to take on risk. Okay. So so the ability. Capacity would be our financial industry definition word. So your situation, in other words, how much money do you have? Is this amount of money that you want to invest? Is it all your money? Like you've got together, $5,000 and that's all your savings. Well, your capacity is actually quite low for risk in that situation, because if something happened to that money, you picked a bad investment or whatever it is, you've changed your outcome of your life, right?
That's right.
So how stable is your job? In other words, how steady is your income stream? If you're a seasonal worker or you're a government worker in this, I would very definitive. Maybe today that's a bad example. Government maybe not so stable as it used to be.
Strike
but
that.
You get the point, right? How stable is your income is another factor of what your capacity for taking risk. Have you already built up your emergency fund and your short-term savings? And then all those things kind of define with what's your health, right? What's your health level like? Our guide or our questionnaire that we'll share with this guide will help you identify what's your capacity to take on risk. That's your ability. That's number one. Your willingness is number two. And we would call that your risk tolerance. It's more of a personality thing, a behavioral thing. How do I respond to certain outcomes in life? Right. And there's some really good questionnaires. It's almost like taking a personality test that says, like, if this were to happen, how do you react? Right. And
Morgan Housel talks about that in The Psychology of Money. He talks a lot about
great book if you want it.
It is. Yeah. That's
book.
why I threw it in there because he talks about really understanding your risk tolerance.
Yeah. It's huge. And people skip over this step.
Yeah. And to accept it. You can't look at somebody else's risk tolerance. No. You have to actually know who you are and not look at anybody else and say, oh, that's good for them, but I am sticking with this.
It's a personality thing, which is why the old adages of like, oh, my coworker told me about this stock they bought at the water cooler and it's gone up and I want that. People drift into that all the time. It's like, well, but that's not you. That's not your risk tolerance.
Right.
And they're probably just telling you the one that went up too, not necessarily all the other ones that didn't. And so it's like, am I an introvert? Am I an extrovert? Like, what's my psychology makeup? Right. And so you have to know that before you get invested in a certain asset allocation, which we'll get to later on. Because your willingness, your tolerance is a huge factor in how you react. To your point earlier, Dave, about crossing the street and the person who got hit by a car versus the person who's crossed the street thousands of times and never hit by a car. People I've heard in the investing world say, oh, I had a bad experience when I was 20. Therefore, investing doesn't work.
Yep.
Well, does crossing the street work? Like,
it has to work.
There are ways to cross the street and it doesn't usually cause damage, but you have to do a number of things. Was I aware? Was I acting reckless? Was someone else randomly disobeying the rules and I was the victim of something that just happened?
It was just life, right?
Yeah. So understanding investing people premise, I've heard a lot of times, oh, investing doesn't work. It's all a scam. Well, that goes back to, again, the first show. Are you saying no businesses grow and provide services and grow profit and revenue and you can't participate in that? That doesn't work? Well, I think there's 100 years of history that would say, no, it does work. Businesses have grown and our lives, maybe not everybody who's listening, but our lives have become on average better. There's lots of risks, lots of things going on. It goes into a whole other topic, right?
Right.
But understanding that willingness to accept risk is so important. And the last one, and people often miss this one, okay? Even planners miss this one. And that is what we would just call your need, your planning need for money. Right. So you could be high risk capacity, lots of money, stable job. You could have high risk willingness. I'm okay with volatility. I could have something drop 20% and I wouldn't be worried. Great, fine. You could check those boxes. But then if you haven't figured out your goal, remember the planning work, what if you need, in order to hit my goal, if I need to achieve a 7% rate of return on average from now until my age 65, in order to hit my goal, my need for return would dictate how much risk I have to take. However, the other side of that is, what if I've accumulated enough where I don't need to have 7%, I only need 2% return to hit my goal? Well, that need actually can dictate how you invest. I technically wouldn't need to invest in volatile equities.
Right.
I could be very safe and steady. Therefore, if I did decide to take risk and invest in a different way, it's only because I felt it was wise or prudent or I wanted to achieve something else. So the need to take risk also needs to be defined, even if you have high capacity or high willingness to take that risk.
Wow.
So that's all part of
need could be split up as well. As you said, okay, so I have enough, my 2% return takes care of my future. I can not worry about it. But you know what? Now I have a certain portion of money that I actually want to do the high risk or do higher risk because I'd really like to see that return
Another
impact.
goal.
Yeah, another goal
emerges, right?
Yeah.
So you have to compartmentalize all of those things and say, defining what is my real goal, and then how do I invest comes out of those 3 risk buckets.
Now, would you say, and I mean, I'm just throwing this out, this is not a question we talked about before, but like the idea of, then if I'm segmenting, then, as a beginner, I start with what's the goal to provide, X at X date, X number of dollars, whatever that is. And that would be kind of the first goal to say, hey, once that's taken care of, then I can start thinking about other goals or 100%. Other things. So kind of lining up those goals in terms of priority may be part of this whole process of understanding risk and beginning. Right?
In fact, you'll see that on page 10 of our guide, right? How to prioritize what to start with and what buckets to start filling,
right?
Which actually is the next step of what we talk about is like when you know your risk tolerance, you can then map that. Like think about it maybe it's good for the listeners to think of it in terms of a score from 0 to 100 and medium risk being right in the middle, 50. Right. While deviance upwards from that up to 100 or downward from that would allocate or would lead towards certain allocations. Lower risk, 100% guaranteed, slowly stepping up, maybe a bit of equity stocks, 20%, maybe an 80% safe, up to 50-50 in the middle, to upwards to higher risk, more equity allocation, less bonds and safe stuff.
Right.
So that gives you, and you'll see in the guide, a framework of, well, what's the historical expected return for each of those asset allocation mixes? Again, it's just a split between, think of it like a pie. How much of it is the safe pieces of the pie and how much of it is the growth kind of exciting up and down higher return, but moving around pieces of the pie. And you can change the shape or how much each piece of the pie is depending on your need, willingness, and capacity to take risk. Now, each of those then gives a expected historical long-term average return. So how much can I expect? Well, low on the low risk side, maybe 3% a year. On the higher side, maybe 10, 12, 13% a year. And somewhere in the middle, 7 or 8% on average. Of course, it's not the same every year, right? So there's a volatility of return that we give a little chart here to say, well, if you're going to go down the middle one, 7 or 8%, you should expect to see plus or minus from that a certain amount every year. Sometimes you're going to get a year of 14, 15%, like the last year or two has been in the market. But you back up to 2020 or 2008 or 2001, and you have to go through periods of dropping 20, 30%. But the average still might be 7 or 8. So we add 2 more data points on there for people to look at. And that is, what's the worst drawdown year I have to go through? And this is a behavioral psychology thing. We always talk about drawdowns because that causes more psychological pain than the up draws, if you will, or draw ups.
And that drawdown, it just for in basic language is you might be losing money.
You would be losing on paper. Your portfolio, you put in $1,000 and it's now showing on your statement at $750.
And you're like,
down 25%. Whoa. And what every brain that really doesn't have a willingness or a tolerance to accept risk, we extrapolate that trend indefinitely into the future.
Right.
So it's always, people say, well, if I'm from 1,000 now, I'm down to 750. Well, if this keeps going at this pace, I'm going to be at 500 and then 0 in X period of time. I can't do that. Stop. Get me out now because I don't want to keep going. Get me out so that I can stop the pain. Okay. And that's the tolerance part. Some people will freak out at that point and then conclude, like we said earlier, oh, investing doesn't work, right? Don't do it. And they tell their friends and everybody. But some people say down 25%. Okay. I'm okay with that. I know what I own. I think it's going to come back. I'm in it for the long term. I'm not at my goal point. Like, I don't need to worry yet. I'll stay invested. In fact, maybe I'll buy more of what's down because it's cheap now, right?
Okay.
And so it's that volatility.
Yes.
Our job as advisors, or the people who are reading this, are not meant to say there is one allocation that is better than any other. There's no optimal solution to that. Our job is not to put people into risk and try to, I may have perspectives on that. Like I think owning more businesses, stock ownership in the long term is better for people. But my job is not to push them there. It's to say what's appropriate for this person's willingness, capacity, and need. And then we pick the right mix and say, now you've got to hold on to that and stay, even when you feel nervous, gets a little bit sweaty of, oh, this is going to keep going indefinitely. Or euphoria, the last few years, risk right now, people are like, I love risk, right? and because they only see the upside of risk right now. So we actually try to encourage people, do these tests every couple of years and at different phases of the market or the business cycle. Do it when it's really bad and you're like, all of a sudden your answers are different. I hate risk. I don't want risk. Or things are really good. Like, I want more of this. Give me more of this. I'm going to be retired.
Wow.
Like I was as a young guy when I started in this business at 19 years old. I was like, we hit the tech bubble. It was 97, 98, 99. And I thought, I am so smart. Like I am so good at this thing. Thankfully, the crash taught me a really good lesson too in this, right? But you extrapolate the good into the future. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be retired by the time I'm 30. Obviously the hubris of youth got corrected. But that's such a good lesson, right?
That is a good lesson.
Up risk is actually sometimes does more damage because you switch your asset allocation to more risk. This is great. I love this. Get me more of this. And then all of a sudden you experience the downside, which will inevitably come and you can't handle it. You thought you could handle it, but you couldn't. So it's really important to get that right so that you invest in the right asset allocation.
And I want to go back to, though, and just to make a comment, and this is exactly where the gambling, we talked about gambling before, right? This is exactly where the kind of that gambling mentality can take an effect because you're like, okay, now how do I time that market? Like, how do I, and you can't. You cannot time it. And so you're going, okay. And this is why, again, in scripture, we talk about diversification. You're saying, you might have part of that allocation that is high risk and enjoying it. And then you might have part that is not doing so well. And that actually is what we want to work, right?
Yeah.
So just because we have so much time left, we've got asset allocation, but we also have where and how, like what accounts.
Yeah.
So
this gets tricky and it's probably better to keep it kind of short here, but there's a chart in the guidebook that talks about essentially what account types you could start using depending on your situation. And it's very unique, right? So it's very hard to say in a session like this, what's the right thing to do? There isn't one right thing, but from an understanding perspective, I think it's helpful for people to think what we're investing in is not determined by the account type you open. And I would argue many banks do a disservice because they tell people, oh, you should buy a TFSA. And it's like, we used to be inferred as, oh, it's a GIC, it's a savings account, it's something because that's what the bank was offering. But really, if you step back, any of these account types are really just think of it like a bucket, like a rain barrel or something, right? That, and you label one tax-free savings account, one you label RRSP, FHSA, first home savings account, non-registered investment account, basically just the bucket at the end that collects money if you happen to have more rainwater to fill it. And each label dictates how the money is going to be taxed. That's really plain and simple. It comes down to taxation of each of these barrels or buckets. And what you put in, like once you put money into each one of them or any of them, what you buy doesn't really matter. If you're on the right platform, I would say, where you can buy anything, they could match all the same. You could make one account safe, like just buy your bonds over there. The other one, you could buy your stocks in. Your asset allocation decision is independent of what bucket you're putting money into.
Can I use another metaphor? Because I love this metaphor. We all understand the house, right? So you go to the kitchen, you go to the living room, you go to the entertainment room, you go to the bathroom, there's all these different rooms. And I've always thought about this like that. My TFSA, that's the kitchen. And I can make and eat a meal and there's stuff going on in there, but I can also actually like eat in the bedroom if I want to, or eat in other places. Like all of those, as you said, those how we invest is inside of each room. But each room, as you leave the room, has a different surcharge. Like it's a different kind of, okay, if I leave this room with an RSP, I take money out of an RSP, I can experience a tax implication.
For sure.
Whereas if I'm in a tax-free savings account, there's no tax implications. And both of them have benefits and sometimes even different times of your life that you want to be moving money from one to the next. And so I think of them often, not rain barrels, but as kind of rooms that we navigate at different parts of our life, just like we navigate different rooms in our day and going from there. And I find that really helpful for my brain to go, okay, you know what, we're going to put money into a TFSA because I don't want there to be any tax liability on these investments and this growth, but I still want to invest in stocks or invest in whatever that allocation is inside that room.
So we have a guide, like sort of a chart book in here that would say when you should use one over the other, when you should go to each one of those rooms. Just quickly, an RSP is useful if you're in a high tax bracket today, you pay a lot of tax. Well, putting some money into an RSP will give you a deduction and lower your taxes, and you'll get a refund today. And then the theory is, or the plan is that in the future, you expect to be in a lower tax bracket so that when you pull the money out, you pay less tax then and you save the difference basically of what you were earning, what your tax rate was when you deposited to your tax rate on withdrawal. That's the difference in savings plus the tax-free compounding over time. But you're right, Dave, people often forget when you start to pull money out. And that's where I like the rain barrel because I think now I'm going to jab a spigot in the bottom of the rain barrel, a tap, and I'm going to turn the tap on and start taking money out. People often forget, oh yeah, I didn't pay tax before. Now I'm going to pay tax. It's give unto Caesar. Now is the time. And do that. So there's an optimal sort of amount, I think, every year to say RSP might make sense. For some people, it might not make sense if they're not in a high tax bracket, and they might be in a high tax bracket later. Like say you're going to inherit money down the road, and then you're in a high tax bracket later. You really should not have put money in an RSP. So you got to be thoughtful about that. The tax-free savings account, you get no upfront benefit for putting money into it. So no deduction, no savings, no refund on your tax return upfront, but all the growth is tax-free and the withdrawal is tax-free. Very, very valuable tool. The non-registered one is basically the basic investment account that no benefit for putting money in, no tax taking it out, except that what you're buying has some taxation. And this probably gets too complex, but you'll pay interest on interest, you'll pay dividend tax, and you'll pay some capital gains tax as you go. But it's kind of like paying it as you go versus this deferral of these other two types of accounts.
So in the guide, you have so much of this information and we just like touched on it, but you'll be able to find it on our resource page at morethanenough.ca, and you'll be able to get access to it. And we're happy to just provide it. Your team has been so good in providing this for us. There's so much good information in here.
That's good.
Yeah.
And I love the charts and the graphs. So like, again, how can,
it's colorful.
And really helpful in terms of different people, how they read materials. So
at the end, it does give you a bit of a guide of where you could go next and how could I actually implement this? And that's a tricky part people might be wondering is what platforms but there's some information, not being specific about firms because we can't do that, but but it's a great guide to the galaxy of investing.
Way to go, Reb.
There you go.
Brought that right back.
Tied it back in.
So, and of course, we want to give a shout out to Stanley's Old Maple Farm and their support. And get out and do that. Get out and enjoy the maple. We only have this short window to do it, and certainly a great experience and great fun. And thank you, Brent.
Thank you
for having
me
here. Thank you for having me. And Stanley's is amazing, by the way. Lots of weddings there. I've had so much fun.
It's a good place.
Go check it out.
And then join us next week when we talk money.
Let's Talk Money is a division of More Than Enough Financial Fitness, where God is transforming hearts and bringing hope for today and freedom for tomorrow. For more information or to comment on today's show, please visit morethanenough.ca.